Greetings, curious spacefarers of the galaxy, and welcome back to the channel. The Death Star was a pinnacle of technological marvels within the known Star Wars galaxy. A battle station with the ability to destroy an entire planet was hardly something that had ever been known up to this point in time. The Death Star itself was something that Emperor Sidious considered to be among his finest achievements, and that shows with his dedication to getting the project up and running, even before he became the Emperor. For 19 years directly after Order 66 and the fall of the Republic, Sidious funneled as many Imperial resources into constructing the Death Star as he could, even to the detriment of some other areas of the Empire. When it was snuffed out by the Rebellion, this dealt a massive blow to the Empire and Sidious directly. However, just a scant 2 years later, the Empire had rebuilt the Death Star. Not only that though, they made it even bigger. So how is this possible? The first Death Star took almost 2 decades to build, and yet its sister was made in just a measly 2 years. This is something that many of us have speculated about, but today, my friends, we are going to hack into the Imperial database and figure out for ourselves how this technological terror was reconstructed so quickly. One thing that is very important to note when speaking about the construction of the Death Stars is the culture of the galaxy around the time of 2 ABY, as this is a major indicator how fast they were able to build it. The reason this matters is that the thing was slowing down the progress of the first Death Star's construction didn't actually have all that to do with resources or manpower. Rather, it had to do directly with the Imperial Senate itself. There was a lot of political games and manipulations that Palpatine had to continue playing with the Senate in order to keep them all complacent and in the dark about what was really going on with the Death Star. He had to consolidate total control over the galaxy and couldn't afford any of these senators to know what he had up his sleeve and that he had absolute military power through force. Because of this, funding for Imperial military projects was all done under the table in order to escape the notice of the Senate. Slave labor, credit embezzlement, and shipyards working overtime kept the construction of the Death Star in business, but still a complete secret. The reason it took almost 20 years to begin with was simply because Sidious had to take extra steps to navigate around the Imperial Senate until it could be dissolved entirely. This was because if the Senate found out about the construction of a battle station of this magnitude, there was likely to be a major revolt. Individually, these systems weren't a problem, but together it could be a huge issue even for the Emperor. The focus at the moment was keeping the senators distracted with their own useless bickering, and to keep them away from giving sympathy to the rebellion. After the Imperial Senate was dissolved in 0 BPY, the Emperor had absolute control over the entire galaxy through military force. Planets were no longer governed by senators or rulers, but rather subjugated under Imperial governors and moffs, with no possibility of pushback by these systems. In addition to this though, there was a carefully crafted construction plan, and the political state in the galaxy was much more affordable, which Emperor Palpatine could construct in the open, and nobody could do anything about it. The Death Star 2 was completed in a 10th of the time it took for the first one. This was done first by absolutely mining dozens of various planets dry of their raw materials. Brutal mining took place on alloy-rich worlds such as Alprazar, and the Empire also made use of scrap from places like Carthon chopfields and Ferrex, until all of them were stripped completely bare. A secret hyperspace lane connected the forest moon of Endor and the factory world of Solist. The Kuat drive yards temporarily ceased construction of Star Destroyers in an effort to work double time in helping to construct the second Death Star, though most of the construction happened on Solist and was shipped to the moon of Endor. While this time around, the Empire didn't have as much Wookiee slave labor, which posed a problem, as during the Civil War, many of them had been liberated. This wasn't a major issue, however, as they did have a large amount of service droids that could take care of building the outside of the station. Since the Empire wasn't having to buy raw materials and was instead mining them without intervention, they could splurge on having several teams of these droids to help out on the construction of the battle station, making the progress even faster. Also during this time, the Emperor cleverly devised a scheme to lure the rebellion into a trap by leaking the information about the Death Star 2 to some Alliance spies. This intelligence was falsified and claimed that the second battle station was vulnerable and incomplete. However, Sidious made sure that the reactor cores and the super laser were the very first things finished before ever doing the outer shell. This is why we see the second Death Star in a more exposed looking state. It was to further project the illusion that it was far from being completed, when in fact, as Sidious put it was fully operational. The Emperor made up for the obvious weaknesses of so much of the innards being exposed by placing a shield generator on the forest moon of Endor, With all of these things combined, the stage was set for the rebellion to make their strike, and they would be walking into a massive trap. Of course though, we know how this story ends, and the Emperor made the same mistake that the Jedi once did, and allowed his hubris to get the better of him, despite his massive second battle station and massive advantage over the rebellion, as well as Luke. Palpatine completely underestimated the effectiveness of the rebel strike team on Endor, as well as the helplessness of the Ewoks. In the throne room, Darth Sidious was entirely focused on the climactic battle between the father and son Skywalkers to sense the turning of the tides in battle just below them. The Death Star was meant to be one of Darth Sidious's final shows of power, and an attempt to consolidate as much power after destroying the rebellion. Darth Sidious also made it much larger because he could, and the size of the battle station was meant to show what an unrestrained Emperor in an unrestrained galaxy could bring upon those that defied its eternal throne. But, students of the Force, this is how the second Death Star was completed so rapidly. So, tell us, was this something that had always bothered you, or at least made you wonder, and exactly how they completed the second Death Star in 2 years, when the original design took nearly 20? Of course, there were always other small factors, such as the construction had already been done before, and the Empire knew how to do it, and they already had the schematics for the first Death Star, which again moved the process along. But the major contributor, of course, was now that Palpatine had complete dominion over the galaxy. He could do essentially whatever he wanted without the Senate getting involved. If you found this video helpful and like these kinds of breakdowns, be sure to tell us down below what other things in Star Wars lore that have been picking your brain. Until then, my friends, may the Force be with you, and I hope that you're having a great day.